Okay, so I'm reacting to Be a Man, Modernists and Traditionalists Debate Masculinity by Vice News. I'm especially excited for this one because here on this channel, we try and explore the unfamiliar by looking at both sides of any issue. And how to be a man, right? It's a hot topic, masculinity, femininity, everyone's talking about it. So let's see what both sides of the spectrum says and see if they can have a consensual, respectful debate where they're listening to understand each other instead of just waiting to say whatever they want to say.
My name is Tahoe. I'm a black man from the hood. When I was young, being a man, you had to be tough. You had to be hard. And now, to me, being a man is a lot different. Now, to me, being a man is knowing when to be soft.
Do you think we're all becoming too soft? Not just men, but women? In my eyes, it's been good to promote mental health and promote vulnerability. But do you think some people are using this age of vulnerability for power? In the sense that, if I act vulnerable and if I share this, then I'll get sympathy points and victim points. Do you think right now we're in that age where people are taking care of that positive movement and using it in a way to gain power? I don't know.
Is there a crisis in masculinity? If so, what is that crisis?
The thing that I see is a lot of deconstructing generational trauma. The be a man, boys don't cry, this, that, and the other thing. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why we see it as a crisis, because we're actually trying to redefine what it means to be a man, and none of us have any idea because we're just out here trying to be whoever we are.
That's right.
The key element to all this and why this is a problem here in Western society, we're having this big crisis because we're all genuinely confused on both sides on how to act, right? And ultimately, since we do live in this society that at least touts the ideals of free speech and free expression, but maybe we don't have the guidance that we used to in the past. I think in a reason why, right, traditions and gender roles exist is that it gives people this guidance on how to act. I think that's in a way why religion is something that's big throughout the world. It gives people kind of comfort on this idea of death and afterlife and how you should live your day-to-day life as you were put onto this earth. I think a lot of people in these types of movements are happening because they're just genuinely confused on how to act, right? Media's telling them one thing, education's telling them one thing, but then they also have this nature within themselves to want to act a certain way. That's a big crisis that's happening, is that we just don't have the proper guidance. I hate to say it, but a lot of people want to be influenced, want to be told how to act because it gives them a lot of comfort and they don't have to think as much and look inwards.
If I dance a certain way, or if I wear my hair a certain way, if I dress a certain way, they go, real men don't do that. Real men don't do that. And so you get scared to move a certain way because you don't want to get judged or outed out of the accepted part of your community. And I think that kind of has us in an uproar, and we don't know where to be. Where's the safe?
I'm making predictions. I think that dude wearing the black dress, I think there's going to be some beef with maybe the black dude here, and also maybe the guy wearing the cowboy hat. Look, I live in Texas, and if I had to guess, he's probably on the traditionalist side and not the modernist, but we'll see.
I was what you would call a toxic masculine male growing up. And I had good men that sewed into me. They gave me good advice, but I never found manhood and I never understood my place as a man until one day I humbled myself and I gave my life to the Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm telling you right now, walking with God changed my life forever.
Can you define toxic masculinity?
I would say toxic masculinity is like what he was just saying, where you're using that leadership role or that aggressive nature in a harmful way to harm other people to get your way.
I wonder if it will ever be a term of talking about the other spectrum of toxic femininity, because absolutely there exists toxic and extreme ideas in any side of the spectrum, right? Whether that's masculinity or femininity. I wonder if that's going to start being talked about, or are we still going through kind of the overcorrection where for years women were oppressed, and now this attack on their masculinity that a lot of people call it is happening to overcorrect for those past. But I wonder, just as in anything, the pendulum is always swinging. If we'll ever reach the point where we can have more nuance in these discussions and explore the extremes on both sides that, in my mind, are toxic, right? I think the truth always lies in the middle, and any sort of extremes is a selfish belief in the sense that you're saying that this extreme belief that I hold is so right, that the other side is just so wrong. So, see.
I think everybody sort of has a different definition of toxic masculinity. I don't find masculinity toxic in and of itself, but I do believe in bad men, and bad men exist.
Just me, this bro look like he's like AI. Like he literally looks like what AI will look. I don't know. This he doesn't look real.
I mean, every man is toxically masculine.
Was that toxic masculinity for judging him?
No.
We were talking about a crisis on masculinity. I think that there's a lack of understanding there. So it's like masculinity, being masculine isn't toxic. It's just like there are portions of it that you can dive into that make it toxic.
Because I think a lot of what we think of masculinity is tied into patriarchy, right? Which is to say, like, for the longest period of human history, like, men dominated women.
If y'all had to guess, what do you guys think this host believes? I mean, it is Vice, so I'm going to guess that the people that they hire as hosts are probably on the left-leaning side. It's interesting. I wonder if, for these types of debates, they bring on someone who's a little bit more moderate so they can eliminate the, as much bias as possible. We'll see. And maybe our channel needs to start doing that as me as the host,
I think a lot of times some people make masculinity into a caricature, like it has to be this alpha bro tough guy.
Exactly.
And I find the low-key guy who, is a really great father and a great husband and maybe not like drinking raw eggs every day to be a lot more masculine than the alpha bro who's going and like banging 20 women per weekend and not a responsible man.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, again, right, it's as humans, we judge a book by its cover, right? And even YouTube, right? You clicked on this video because you like the thumbnail, right? We make snap judgments. So that is true. What they call as a true masculine person gets confused by the guy who's loud, rambunctious, sleeps around, is dishonest, doesn't hold himself with integrity, with someone who might be more quiet and reserved, but holds true to his principles, right? In my mind, I agree with him in the sense that that man is more masculine, whereas, someone who's just being disrespectful and rambunctious, but looks alpha and masculine, and most times isn't.
Griffin, I'm wondering, as someone who identifies as non-binary, how does this conversation strike you?
Well, I think that it kind of becomes like irrelevant whether or not we attribute like having like a good ethical compass to being like masculine. Attributing that to like the gender constructs which we have made up, which are like somewhat pointless. Like,
see, that's where it's extreme, right? Like saying the gender dynamics are pointless. No, it's just in general. Men and women have different interests. We have different nature. I don't know why that gets demonized or just completely thrown out the window in the sense that we have biological and different instincts because of that. But let's let them continue.
Kind of just feed into needless roles that uphold the patriarchy without even knowing it. A lot of those things are just things that people should be doing because they're like morally right. Like if you're in a family, you should probably support your family. And I really don't think that it has to do with like your manhood.
These characteristics that we're talking about are baked into an old system of domestic life.
I think that's actually where we get toxic masculinity. Like none of us can really describe what it is, but we can see.
Yeah, see, in a lot of these like discussion on gender, there's a lot of these like different buzzwords that mean nothing because they're kind of just saying it, right? Things like patriarchal, societal, matriarchal, or like toxic masculinity. Like, what does that even mean, right? Because I think it depends on context. If there's a goddamn war going on, you want toxic masculinity to save your country. But let's say if you're in a church setting or in therapy, that's not a good time to display aggressiveness or things like that where you're disturbing the peace, right? There's so much context to this. And I hate how these buzzwords just get thrown out when it doesn't mean anything. Or at least the person saying it doesn't even know what they're meaning to say.
It when it happens.
So we learn it, right? This is something we learn from the world. It's something we learn from like TV and shit. And it's maybe something we learned from our dads too. Tell me about your dad.
I'm a first generation kid. My dad is from Guyana. Grew up in very humble beginnings, poor family. First time I remember my dad telling me he loved me was when I was 17. And he was like saying like he was proud of me because I was about to graduate high school and things like that, I'm appreciative of all the other things, being present as a provider, but in terms of like, the conversation piece and like, I want to talk to my dad about, sex or something, or I want to talk to my dad about, this person broke up with me and I'm feeling pretty sad about it. I didn't have those conversations.
I relate with that. Like in all sense, like my pops was extremely supportive when it came to supporting me in different things I want to do, whether that's sports or any different type of endeavor. But I feel like I never had conversations with him like that. right? Like, what do I do with women? Or what should I do in the context of a date? Or when I have this dude that's like bullying me, what should I do, right? I didn't really have like a masculine presence in that, in which I could go to him with these specific situations. But it was instead, and I think a lot of immigrant households share this, is it was more kind of just like what he was taught as masculinity is providing for the family. But I think this is where the truth lies in the middle, in the sense that, masculinity is getting redefined in the sense that, which I think is a positive, it's not just about providing. It's not just about giving, providing for the family, but then going home and beating your wife. It's actually more about, being kind of like that guidance, that teacher for other men, whether that's your own kids or your peers. So I think it's good to include these types of conversations in this new definition of masculinity. But I don't think masculinity means having to wear a dress now. I don't believe that.
And my definition of manhood came solely from my relationship with God. It didn't come from my father. It didn't come from the good influences around me.
Is God a man?
Yeah, and God is a man. God and God is a father, and he's a good father. He's a perfect father. And so I think there is a clear definition of manhood, where I guess that's where I diverge from everyone else in the room. I believe manhood is clearly defined by God. It is the perfect example of what a man should be.
Christian, I see you nodding your head.
I grew up in a divorced home. When you do grow up in a broken home and you don't have a father in the home, you recognize how important sort of both males and females are in raising a child and being in the home.
Yeah, 100%. And I think right now in a lot of Western society, there's a big fatherlessness problem, as I think, honestly, is leading to debates like this, or this debate topic is even a debate topic because of that, in my opinion.
There's a balance between, masculine energy and feminine energy.
Absolutely.
And I feel like there's both within everybody. And so there's a balance that with masculine energy in itself that I think a lot of people have trouble trying to like reconcile within themselves.
It's hard for men to show more of their feminine side, and I get it, because dudes, we're assholes to each other. We'll roast you if your fit looks whack, if you have no game or don't get any girls, like, we'll roast you. So to show any signs of like weakness or feminine parts, you'll absolutely get roasted. And especially if you grow up with that, like, dude, as men, we're competitive. I played sports my whole life. I was in a frat. There's really no room to show any sort of feminine side. Whereas on the opposite side, for a girl to show like masculine traits, I think now it's actually celebrated, right? Being that boss babe or girl boss. It's more celebrated. Whereas let's say if you're a dude and you're a stay-at-home dad, as much as people say, oh, wow, like, this is great, like, you're non-traditional and you're breaking gender roles, bro, they're kind of looking down on you, I feel like. Let's be real. Both men and women will low-key look down on you if you're just a stay-at-home dad. It's unfortunate. It's reality.
Y'all just like triggered something in my head when y'all was speaking about having both in the home. To me, I didn't really have it there. And it made me feel a way, but I think that I always wanted one. And so I wound up at a certain age going outside and trying to find what masculinity was outside. And so I went on the corner, and there were 20 of us on the corner, and none of us had dads. We were all messed up, and so we all taught each other the wrong way to love, to be loved, and then...
And see, that's exactly the point I was talking to, in the sense that with this big fatherlessness problem that we also have a lack of positive role models. So instead of emulating that guy who might be reserved but holds true to his integrity, his values, and his purpose, the role models that we see now, whether it be in the media or within your community, might be that louder, rambunctious guy who's may appear masculine but isn't true to his word, doesn't provide for his family, and it's not a good representation of masculinity, becomes kind of like that role model that a lot of men without fathers look up to. And to be honest, I think that's why someone like, let's say, like Andrew Tate became so popular. I think in a way he does absolutely say a lot of positive things and truths of the world. But I think, besides all that, the reason why he became popular is that a lot of men are looking for some sort of guidance. And when someone is speaking to those truths and not holding back, in a media environment where that really isn't represented, and in fact, kind of downplayed of the importance of masculinity, someone like that had come up and spoke to a lot of young men. So I think I'm just going to end it here. But yeah, so what I do on this channel is I explore both sides of social and controversial issues. So if you want to see more reaction video, click up here.